What happens when the most valuable player on the planet becomes the target? Not a strikeout. Not a walk. Not even a brilliant defensive play. What stopped Shohei Ohtani in his tracks on that warm evening wasn't a moment of baseball brilliance, it was a moment of baseball ugliness. A dirty hit. A play that made an entire stadium hold its breath, then erupt. A play that sent the Cubs' second baseman to the locker room early, not by injury, not by choice, but by the firm and final decision of the umpire standing right there at the center of it all. The fifth inning. That's where everything changed. And if you think this is just another ejection story, just another routine moment that will be forgotten by morning, you haven't been paying attention to what Shohei Ohtani means to this game right now. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you need to understand what was at stake before a single controversial play even happened. The game between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs was already electric. These aren't two ordinary franchises meeting on an ordinary Tuesday night. The Dodgers, armed with the most jaw-dropping roster construction in recent memory, were carrying the weight of championship expectations on every single pitch. The Cubs, scrappy and hungry, came into this game with something to prove, that they could physically and mentally compete with a Dodgers lineup that features the greatest baseball player alive. And at the center of that Dodgers lineup, as he always is, stood Shohei Ohtani. By the time the game reached the fifth inning, the crowd was already buzzing. Every at-bat Ohtani stepped into felt like a mini-event. Cameras tracked his every move. The opposing dugout was locked in. Every pitcher had a plan for him, every fielder was repositioned, every fan in that stadium leaned forward just a little more when his number came up in the order. That's what Ohtani does to a baseball game. He raises the stakes simply by existing within it. But what nobody anticipated, what nobody could have scripted even in the most dramatic baseball fiction, was what was about to happen in the middle of that fifth inning. Not from the pitcher's mound. Not from the batter's box. But from the infield dirt, where a play unfolded that crossed a line. Let's talk about exactly what happened, because the details matter here. Ohtani was moving through his at-bat with the focus and composure that has become his trademark. There was nothing unusual about his approach. He was locked in, studying the pitcher, working the count the way only elite hitters can, reading spin, reading release, reading intention. Then came the play. The Cubs' second baseman, positioned squarely in the infield, made contact with Ohtani in a way that immediately sent a shockwave through the stadium. It wasn't a freak collision. It wasn't an unavoidable accident of bodies moving at high speed in a small space. It was the kind of hit that people in baseball recognize immediately. Players know. Coaches know. Umpires know. And the fans? They knew too, which is exactly why the reaction was so loud and so immediate. The stadium didn't go quiet. It erupted. Both dugouts were on their feet within seconds. Players who had been sitting calmly on the bench were now pressed up against the railing, shouting. Coaches were out of their seats. The energy shifted from competitive intensity to something rawer, something angrier, the kind of energy that fills a ballpark when something genuinely wrong has just happened on the field. And the umpire saw it. There was no lengthy deliberation. No extended conference between the crew. The umpire who had the best angle on the play had already seen everything he needed to see. The arm went up. The call was made. The Cubs' second baseman was gone, ejected, right there in the fifth inning, and the message sent to both teams and the entire stadium was clear. That kind of play has no place in this game. When a player gets ejected, there are really only two kinds of reactions. Some players accept it. They take off their helmet, maybe say a few words they'll later regret, and they walk. Others make it a moment. The Cubs' second baseman made it a moment. The argument that followed the ejection was heated. There were words exchanged at a volume that needed no microphone to translate. Hands moved. Faces flushed. The kind of confrontation that replays on highlight reels not because of its physical drama, but because of the visible frustration of a player who either genuinely believed he had done nothing wrong, or knew exactly what he had done and was choosing to challenge the call anyway. The Cubs' dugout was animated throughout the exchange. Manager was up. Staff was up. And the crowd, already loud, got louder still, because nothing in a baseball game pulls the energy to an absolute peak quite like a full-on ejection dispute playing out in front of 40,000 people. While chaos swirled around him, Shohei Ohtani did what Shohei Ohtani does. He stayed composed. There was no dramatic pointing. No screaming. No gesture toward the Cubs' dugout. He assessed the situation, communicated with his teammates and coaching staff in the calm, measured way that has defined his public presence since the moment he stepped onto an MLB field, and he refocused on the game. This is something that gets overlooked when we talk about what makes Ohtani different from every other player in baseball right now. Yes, the home runs are historic. Yes, the pitching is extraordinary. Yes, the two-way production is something that hasn't been seen in this game in generations. All of that is true and all of that is documented and all of that will eventually find its place in Cooperstown. But the composure? That is something else. That is something rarer than talent. Think about the pressure that comes with being Shohei Ohtani in 2025. Every game is a national event. Every at-bat draws scrutiny from fans, analysts, and opponents worldwide. He plays under a level of attention that would buckle most human beings, and yet he absorbs it, channels it, and converts it into consistency. When a dirty hit comes his way, when a play is made against him that the umpire himself deems worthy of immediate ejection, Ohtani doesn't let it become his story. He doesn't let someone else's poor decision define his afternoon. He plays baseball. And that restraint, that refusal to be pulled off his center even when the game itself is trying to pull him there, is a form of greatness that no stat line will ever fully capture. Let's zoom out for a second, because this incident didn't happen. When you are the best player in the world, and in 2025, the argument for Shohei Ohtani holding that title is nearly impossible to dispute, you become a target in ways that go beyond normal competition. Opposing teams don't just game plan for you statistically. They think about your rhythm, your routine, your comfort zone. They think about how to disrupt you, how to get inside your head, how to make you feel the game differently than you want to feel it. A dirty hit on a player of Ohtani's stature is never just an isolated play. It is a statement, intentional or not, about how far a team is willing to go in its effort to neutralize him. And the umpire's ejection is an equally clear statement from the game itself: there are limits. There are lines. And the players, coaches, fans, and the sport as a whole have a responsibility to protect those limits. The fact that the ejection came as quickly as it did speaks to the clarity of the play. This wasn't a borderline call. This wasn't a moment where reasonable people could disagree about intent or impact. The umpire saw it, processed it, and acted, and in doing so, protected not just Ohtani, but the integrity of the game being played around him. That matters. Especially now. Because Ohtani isn't just a player anymore. He is the living, breathing embodiment of what baseball can be when everything comes together: the talent, the preparation, the character, the global appeal. Protecting him on the field isn't favoritism. It is the sport protecting its own future. For the Chicago Cubs, this ejection arrived at the worst possible. The Cubs bench had to reconfigure. Decisions were being made in real time about positioning and coverage in the infield. And all of this was happening while their dugout was still buzzing from the confrontation, while emotions were still running high, while the focus that every competitive team needs to beat a roster as deep and dangerous as the Dodgers was fractured. This is the hidden cost of a dirty play. It's not just the play itself. It's the consequence of the play, the ejection, the disruption, the emotional hangover that follows a team for the rest of an inning or the rest of a game. Great teams manage these moments. They reset. They refocus. But great teams also put themselves in positions where they don't have to manage them in the first place. There is a broader conversation worth having here, and it starts with a simple question. What does baseball owe Shohei Ohtani? Not in terms of money. That conversation was settled when the Dodgers signed him to the most significant contract in professional sports history. Not in terms of fame. He generates that naturally, in every country, in every time zone, with every swing and every pitch. What baseball owes Ohtani is protection. On-field protection. The kind that comes from umpires making the right calls at the right moments. The kind that comes from other players understanding that reckless, dirty plays against any player, but especially against someone who has become the face of the sport, carry real consequences. The ejection in the fifth inning was the right call. And the swiftness of it, the clarity of it, the absence of any hesitation, that should be the standard. Not just for Ohtani. For every player. But the fact that it happened in a moment involving Ohtani. You play this game with respect. Or you don't play it at all. When the final out of this game was recorded, people weren't talking about ERA, OPS, or fielding percentages. They were talking about the fifth inning. They were talking about the hit. About the eruption. About the ejection that came swiftly and without apology. And they were talking about the way Shohei Ohtani handled it, with a stillness and a focus that reminded everyone watching exactly why he is impossible to stop, impossible to rattle, and impossible to look away from. A dirty hit tried to change the story of this game. Ohtani didn't let it. And that, more than any home run or strikeout or diving catch, is what separates the truly great from everyone else. It's not just what they do when everything is going right. It's what they do when someone tries to take it all away from them in the middle of the fifth inning, in front of 40,000 people, with the whole baseball world watching. Shohei Ohtani answered that question clearly. The Cubs' second baseman answered a different one, and he answered it from the locker room.